this work session tonight. We didn't, as I said before, we really didn't change the conditional use permit process too much. It was working pretty well, although staff had a little bit of issue with determining what an established conditional use permit meant. And so we set forth these four pretty much here's what it means when how we determine when a conditional use permit expires. And the biggest one was when any conditional use permit is not operational pursuant to the approved conditional use permit. We need to make sure that there's a business license, and if the conditions of approval haven't been met, then it would be expired, and or if it hasn't been addressed within 2 years. 2 years seems to be where PZBC seemed a little bit comfortable. The last time that we were here, we kind of kicked around 2-3 years. Staff seems comfortable with 2 years. So, is that from the council's perspective? Do these four criterion resonate with you? Do you think we nailed it, or are there any changes or any challenges that we should know about?
I like it. I think it's good we finally put a time frame on there instead of, well, they spent some money, so that's good, so we'll give them another extension. Okay, they spent some money. I think putting a time frame, if they're gonna do it, open up within this time, or sorry.
Okay.
It's time we've gone there.
That was an issue before planning and zoning recently. Yeah, that's helpful.
Okay.
Having those guidelines. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, everybody else good?
The point about extension shall exceed 3 years. 3 additional years, a total of 3 years, 3 years for
No extension shall exceed 3 years.
So it's a total of 5.
They may request extensions, but no more than 3 years.
So that could be 3 1-year. I think
It's an annual.
In my opinion, and perhaps I'm just being thick,
Okay.
but that's not happening. But 3 years is, into my way of thinking, not clear.
Well,
The
we've
total.
Yeah.
My point is, okay, so they have 2 original years. So now they can get an extension. Is that 3 additional years for 5, as Karen suggested? Or is it 1 more year to make a total of 3? I think that I don't understand it.
okay. So you're not in support of the extensions, because that's what we've been dealing with, was the whole.
No, I don't have a problem with extensions.
Okay.
I'm just
We're
thinking
trying to
that
meet
the
the
3 years is
definition.
vague. Well, I got a permit, sorry if I'm getting loud. Conditional use permit I have, 2 years.
Uh-huh.
So I read that and said, hey, I could get 1 extension for 3 years, that gives me 5 total. 3 more years to do nothing.
Can I tell you what I think that means? And that is, it's the third bullet point primarily, and that is, you have to act on the CUP, the original CUP, within 2 years.
Right.
And if you do so, if you finalize it with a business license or what have you, then you're good to go. But the CUP operator may request an annual extension, so you have to come before planning and zoning annually.
1 year extension.
Exactly.
Right.
That's
Is that
what
what you
that
intended?
means. The
It says
CUP
annual on there.
Right, annual extension, but no extension shall exceed 3 years. So you could not accumulate more than 3 annual extensions.
How about if it just said the total number of extensions shall not exceed 3 years?
Okay.
So you're gonna have the 2 plus the 3, basically, is where I'm.
No.
You get the 2 plus 3 1-year extensions.
That's right.
For a total of 5
For a
years.
total of
That's
5.
right, it could be
Okay.
5.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe that's what it needs to say. You get your original 2 years plus 3 1-year extensions.
I
Totaling
still
no
think
more
it's
than
too
5.
long.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
I still think it's
I
too
think it's-
long.
that's-
Okay, well then, and I'm
What
just.
do you mean, the time is too long?
5 years.
5
is
years.
too
I'm
much.
trying to figure out what you're gonna do.
5 years is too much.
I think
Then we
No,
want
I
one,
disagree.
I'll throw the marijuana issues out there. When people got CUPs, then they kept extending. They weren't doing anything, but they were
They don't
able
wanna
to.
give up that option.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So I
But-
think that's what brought this into play, I
Actually,
believe.
when marijuana came into being and we had the whole CUP process, no one was required to act on their CUP, correct me if I'm wrong, for a number of years until 2018, when planning and zoning had the annual review process implemented, right? You could have a conditional use permit and nobody was really looking at how old the conditional use permits were until 2018. So you could have had a CUP for, I think, 4 years, 4 or 5, and then they began the annual review process, and that's what caused everyone to say, okay, you gotta act on this. And that was a problem for some, not for others. But that was, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a long time, but
Right.
there was like a 4 or 5 years, didn't have to do anything.
But this conditional use permit expiration statement is not limited only to marijuana.
Correct.
And most of that
Yeah,
is-
right.
So it involves a lot of conditional use permits.
Exactly.
And I think I'm initially, in a first blush in agreement with Rusty, we said, 5 years, that's a long damn time to get something going. But Karen says, no, it isn't. I'm interested in hearing more what you think of.
Well, from personal experience,
There you go.
because when we started developing Wendy's, we
Right.
started in 1995, and the adjacent landowner started litigation against us, and it was in the court system for 5 years.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Then, do we, would you agree that, and I'm sorry that that happened, but would you agree that that is more an exception than the rule?
No,
No, okay.
I don't
Alright.
believe,
I agree. I was focused on marijuana. I'm just tired of all the standing CUPs. I didn't go outside
Right.
that scope. You're right. That works just fine for me.
Very persuasive.
Because
You-
in the marijuana
Oh,
industry,
yeah.
the only thing we're gonna have any CUPs for is now are infused or grows. No more retail outlets anyway, so.
Karen had insight to a particular experience.
Yeah.
It opened up a whole new.
True.
and we were required by law to stop.
Right.
We
Yeah.
could not continue, we
Right.
could not open.
All right.
Can I ask Carrie a question about this? The only concern I have about the language of this, which is on page 64 of our books, is that it's a little bit, the wording is confusing. Because it's saying all CU approvals shall remain in effect for a specified period of time with the following exceptions. And then it goes through, and it starts with unless, it's kind of, it would be easier if it was spelled out more clearly, because you have to, unless is a difficult, it is a difficult term to, you go, does that mean in the event that it has happened or it hasn't happened? I just think it could be worded more
Stated
Okay,
simply.
sure.
Well,
Well, how about this, we'll work on that, we'll make those revisions. And then, am I hearing that, that actually the 5-year having a 5-year, the 3-year, and like if we had the CUP operator may request an annual extension, but no extension shall exceed 3 years, maybe if that was its own bullet?
How about if it was to say the CUP operator may request up to 3 additional 1-year extensions?
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So
That's a good
yeah, like that bullet will be the same, or will be its
No,
own?
but if it's worded up to 3
Okay,
additional 1-year extensions, that's pretty clear. It says you get 1 year up to 3 times.
okay.
The way it's worded there, it lends itself to confusion. And to your point, Aaron, when sometimes we try and legislate for every eventuality, we get volumes. Keep in mind there are 10 commandments on 2 tablets.
I like that. Can I use that in the future?
Use it. I don't care. Plagiarism saves so much time. But what I'm saying is, if you want to address those unusual or unique circumstances, you may say that. This is the rule. You get 3 additional 1-year extension, and unique situations will receive individual consideration. If you want to allow for that situation, we have somebody involved in a lawsuit, and you want to give them some rhythm
Okay.
to continue to be in the fight till they get their victory.
You guys, Donna,
We'll let you-
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. When I was involved with planning and zoning, one of the issues, and maybe this is addressed somewhere else, Carrie, that part of what seemed to cause the problem is when it came to extensions, all they had to do was nail in a few nails, and that was enough to keep that CUP active. Has that been addressed somewhere in here, that elsewhere maybe? Because I know it caused a lot of angst on the planning and zoning, because what constitutes needing an extension or needing to keep that?
How about if it was?
That was the first bullet, that any conditional use is not operational. It needed to be operational. Instead of like, oh, if there was a nail in there, or if they, you know,
Right, in order to
Have to-
justify.
it needed to be operational.
Right, have to have the business license.
Yeah, and it has to be, have the
Yeah.
business license.
Yeah,
Okay.
got it.
Okay.
But instead of a building permit though, that goes back to that point. Someone can renew a building permit and
Right.
staff might end up in the same situation. Well, they have a valid building permit. What have they done? Well, they put a couple nails in, their
I
permit's
gotcha.
still valid.
Okay, what,
How long is a building permit valid?
6 months.
6 months, and as long as they're
Yeah.
continuing it.
would the word,
anything.
yeah,
Oh, sure.
okay, would the word qualified be helpful? The CUP operator may request a qualified annual extension for up to 3 or however. So that means, you know, if you have somebody coming before P&Z and they put in 2 nails, say this, but they say, well, that's no progress.
Right.
And you just can't. It has to be substantive.
Right, and I guess how do you measure that?
And,
Yeah.
well,
That was always the issue.
And Carrie,
Is how do you measure that?
yeah, that's a good point.
As
But
far
at the
as-
same time, we can't be so specific to identify every eventuality.
No, but
operational is not a defined term in the definition, so it might be helpful to, what does that mean, be
Mhm.
operational?
Am I hearing that maybe having a building permit as a qualifier is not helpful?
I think they could request an extension right?
But I said.
So, I mean, unless a building, unless a business, they have to have a business license.
Who distinguishes the difference between what they're doing for a few nails or something?
The board to which they are appealing for.
That's
the
why I say,
extension.
so some discretion has to be left to the board for them to decide.
But that was
You-
always the challenge,
That was-
Frank, is
well,
what
the split board
constitutes, so
argument.
you could have a conditional use permit out there that was just kind of out there and nothing, it just stayed out there because they were still working on the building or whatever they were doing.
Yeah, but the
and-
board should
that
have
was the
some idea of
challenge.
what's going on and bring some results to them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, somewhere
let's
along the
face it,
line, they have to be in charge too
Right.
Yeah,
of
and,
their
and,
responsibilities.
yeah, and I think what this bullet is saying is that you need to get your business license and your building permit within 2 years from the date of your conditional use permit approval. That's what this is saying. So, if you hadn't gotten your business license and you haven't gotten your building permit within 2 years of when PZBC issued approved your conditional use permit, then you're out.
Okay, well,
That's what that's saying.
Yeah, as I listen to you, the phrase significant benchmarks pops into my head.
Yeah.
So that the board who's hearing this has something on which to base their authority. But I don't, but then you define those
Right.
benchmarks. I don't
Well,
get it. They
the
can't be arbitrary, I don't get it.
no, and I don't think that is. I mean, that what this bullet is basically saying is that, okay, if the PZBC issues you a conditional use permit, you need to get a business license and you need to get a building permit and you need to do that within 2 years.
Right.
It will expire, your conditional use permit approval will expire in 2 years if you have not done those two things. So there's nothing tricky about
Why
that.
not then just define operational as getting a building permit and or a building permit, I'm sorry, getting a business license and or a building permit if it's required, then, because then you're saying the same thing twice, if that's what
Okay,
operational means.
yeah, we could do that to streamline that.
Because otherwise I don't know what operational means. It seems like it might mean something different since you're restating it in the second point.
To you.
Because then you have a basis for that additional year each time they come forward if they want an extension, you have a basis.
Okay, that's a great suggestion.
Just to put the,
Cool.
judge that on.
I get it, but it just is saying
Yeah.
the same
Oh, I
thing
do.
twice.
Sure.
Perfect. Okay, that's great feedback. Awesome. Short-term rentals, my goodness. So we didn't know, wasn't even on our radar when we first. When, I know. So we crafted these regulations, and that are in your packet, and I'm really looking for some direction. Do they address your concerns, and how has short-term rentals been working in your community? Right now, what we just proposed, and again, every community is different, how they want to embrace them or not. It really depends on what you want. So right now, most of them are reviewed through the conditional use permit process. And, but we have them as a use by right in the community, commercial, the historic preservation district, and the TMU, which is that tourism mixed use district that's basically out in Cougar Canyon. If it ever gets rezoned that, right now it's PB. And with neighborhood impact, see, most communities, they say, okay, we really would like to collect, lodging tax, right? We want the revenue, and if we could find a way to address the neighborhood impacts, we'd be really good with it. And so that's what we heard you guys wanted to do. And so we put some limitations on, the density, and we just threw out some parking requirements. Most communities, and you guys might feel different, I don't know, but right now, let me back up, like right now we have one parking space per bedroom, but that might be a little bit too stringent for you guys. It might be, for most short-term rentals are in single-family residential homes. Do you want to have them say, if there's a big 4-bedroom home, they have to have four parking spaces, and that would really work, so.
Carrie, if I could, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this needs to be the subject of a work session for city council. And we've been wanting for this to be, and we just haven't been able to, the whole subject of short-term rentals. And we have had a number of staff meetings on these, but we need to have.
Scheduled for March 9th.
Thank
in
you.
our
Okay.
wrapping it up here, because there's a lot of issues with us regulating. So if we're regulating, then do we inspect the homes that they're short-term rental? And if we inspect the homes, are they ADA accessible?
That's right.
There's a whole myriad of things that come into play.
Do they need to have fire alarms?
Exactly,
Or do
and
they need regular
so if we
inspections?
allow it, then are we liable if something happens
That's
in
right.
that Airbnb?
Does
So,
each room have,
Yeah, there's-
and all that kind of stuff?
so we have a work session.
And the other thing too is, how do you define short term? How do you define?
30 days
Nine.
or less.
Oh, yeah.
How many? 8?
30.
30. See, here's, with our housing shortage, we have these traveling nurses and doctors. We only have so much space at our place, and we stay full up. So some of our Airbnbs have traveling nurses that come in. They're there for more than 30 days. They can't find a place to rent, and they're turning to the Airbnbs. Are we going to eliminate that place for them to have a place to live while they're here working? That's a problem.
Our recommendation is going to be, kind of in a nutshell, that you allow these, but that we don't regulate them very heavily.
And
That we
that's
don't-
what we did here last,
Yeah,
I mean,
good.
we basically said you need to get a business license, one short-term rental per residential dwelling unit, parking, one space per bedroom, which you guys
Yeah.
might wanna do something different,
Yeah.
collect your taxes and fees,
Yeah.
and comply with state regs as
Yeah.
far as,
Oh, yeah, that's a big-
sanitary state and whatever, so
Right.
here, it's very, very minimal, that might not be where you want, you guys might hear in your workshop that you wanna address it different.
It gets too burdensome and too difficult if you really try to regulate this whole thing. And it's not practical to try to outlaw short-term
Right.
rentals. And so it's better to have the tax revenue. Now, and I think as we had discussed, it would be exempt from the whole tourism tax, because it's not. But anyway, that will be the subject of that.
Yeah, the tax
Oh,
thing is a whole different element, but
Right.
to Rusty's point, what we have found is that with the short-term rental, that I've heard in a lot of the smaller communities that I work in, well, I work in, that's all I work in, but, is that, you know, there's the traveling nurses and, you know, those professionals, and they do turn to Airbnb, and the Airbnb and HomeAway or whatever, they actually like renting out to longer-term tenants.
Right.
I bet.
And it's a housing option for them.
Right.
And executive housing is a really big issue these days in small rural communities, you know?
Right, I bet. Yeah, I bet.
Well,
Anyway,
that's the
so-
thing that I haven't looked at, you know, this entire, book that we got here is overregulation. That's the thing that I am very concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that, if we are going to continue to expand our community and be, inviting, if we overregulate, are we going to be pushing away people and pushing away businesses? That's the thing we have to be very careful with too, so in this particular instance, I think it's something we need to look at very carefully.
Yeah, because this approach for short-term rentals is very little regulation.
In your experiences and travels, what are other communities doing? Nothing specific that you can say?
Oh yeah, a lot of small rural communities are taking this approach, which is the balanced approach, which is we like Colorado. We're all about tourism, right?
Right.
And a lot of the smaller communities, rural communities, they're like, yeah, we want people to come to our community, right? And so they adopt the lodging tax. They don't have their pillow tax, so they're like, yeah, we need to be getting revenue. People are going to do it anyway.
Right.
And we just want to mitigate any potential negative impacts. And the biggest impacts that we hear is you know, parking and a proliferation of them.
Have you looked at, I know that whether it'll go through or not, but there is some legislation on short-term rentals at the Capitol. Have you looked at that?
Yes, and that
How does that fit in with?
that what the state is looking at doing, and actually tomorrow I'm going to the Capitol to talk to and participate in a lot of those discussions. And the lion's share of that bill is really to start taxing short-term rentals like a business. Like it has more to do with taxing and how you can file your tax returns, and it's more like having just a regular rental.
Carrie, what does all applicable taxes and fees mean? Where is that?
So if you guys decide you're doing a lodging tax, or if you're gonna tax them different, you know, however you guys are gonna tax them.
So that would be defined somewhere else? It wouldn't say here.
Yeah, that's really in Audra's wheelhouse
Okay.
as far as
Okay,
municipal.
thank you.
Sure. Okay, so when you guys have your workshop, can I watch it on TV?
Sure.
You can.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's gonna be a fun
Watch
one.
your
We're
large
recording
restaurant in the
everything.
corner.
Okay, great.
It's on YouTube. We'll tell
Oh,
you when
that's
it's
so
up.
awesome. Great. Residential architectural standards, we really didn't touch much here. There was a lot of community support for what you guys already had. The only changes that we made were just to make sure that accessory structures were consistent with the character of the existing neighborhood and residential structures, that, you know, complementary colors and materials and all those kinds of things. So again, not a huge change from what you had before. It's just making sure that your accessory structures are consistent with your character. Did the council have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's something that we've had some discussions on, especially now that we've talked about the boxcars.
Containers.
I'll get to those.
Storage containers are in here.
Yes,
Yeah, there you go.
yes. I'll get to those. But generally, is there support for that? Okay.
I think it'd be important as we look at our ADO and as some of these possibly in the future with tear downs and those lots go out to be sold to developers, houses to be built to keep with the character of neighborhoods. I think that's when
Sure.
this will come in play.
And for like building height, I think staff they had a very valid concern, you know, if an ADU is built, they don't want it to be like towering. You know, we want the scale and the size and your
only
Rusty's
question I-
beating me here,
The only
so.
question I had is originally the roof pitch on these, was that always a 612 when that changed, or was it 512 and now we're changing to a 612?
No, it's always been
It's always-
612 since the adoption of that ordinance.
And we didn't really touch that. So with ADUs, we set forth these regulations, these are new, and we set forth these regulations to really implement the housing and neighborhood section of the comprehensive plan. And so there's a lot of good benefits. You know, we heard through the comp plan update process that people really were supportive of that. They want people to be able to age in place. They want their kids to go away to college and want them to come back. You know, they want to have a granny flat and could really help protect your neighborhood stability and all these good stuff. So there's a lot of good benefits to accessory dwelling units. So these regs we crafted, again, we're really looking for you guys to poke some holes in it. Tell us if you're supporting what's here. This is your community, so it's important for you to tell us. So we went with limiting the size to 850 square feet, you know, having one ADU per principal structure, allowing them single family residential, 2-family, and, you know, not exceeding the height of the primary structure.
One thing I did look at with that, maybe it's in there, is within that 850 square feet, does that have to have a separate bathroom from the main house, or?
Yeah, it would be it's a detached structure.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it would have the design standards, the kitchen and the bathroom and no more than 2 bedrooms and compatibility with the principal building.
We had a detached bathroom.
Why so small? 850
We
square
just threw that out there. A lot of small rural communities, they
Well,
resonate to that 850, but it's really up to you. I mean, if you feel that that's small, okay.
Is that something that's, you can get a variance on or something in here, or is that a hard and fast?
This was just our first stab at it. If you guys feel that, hey, we don't really know if 850 feels like that would work or not, if we maybe need to add some flexibility in our admin procedures, we could definitely write that in if you feel more comfortable.
I think it just depends on the size of the lot.
Exactly, there's some
That's
land
it.
issues, you
There's
can't cover your lot.
Right.
to
Because
a
20
certain
by
percent.
40, you're looking at
Right.
something bigger than 20 by 40 is a pretty big space on most lots, especially smaller ones.
Right.
Especially in
Yep.
So that 850 might be okay, but then we might want to consider some deviation, allowing for some.
Well, I think there's a lot of the language in this that talks about administrative abilities where a director can make that decision up, maybe we can allow that up to 10% more or whatever.
Right.
And that's what we have right now is the 10%, but maybe something a little bit more flexible here, or?
Well, I think that's where administratively comes into play, because
Okay.
they'll look at the lot size,
Right.
whether it'll allow for something a bit larger.
Right.
Well, is it better to identify a number like 850, or is it a percentage of the available lot space?
Well,
Because
you have,
You tie yourself in, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you tie yourself into 850 regardless of the lot space. So it says 850, and I got 1200, so we're good.
So what you're saying is not to exceed.
Well, what I'm saying
It
is
says
a
lot size.
proportionate amount
Right.
of available lot space.
It's still in our codes, you're only allowed to occupy so much of the property.
Okay.
Right.
You can't
we
build
have
on
setbacks
more
or
than,
function.
yeah, they're in our
Yeah.
setbacks and everything else in the codes.
Good point.
You can't build more than, I can't remember the number, it's been too long I've been out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like in single family, 25 in the front, 10 in the back,
25, 10 and
5 on the
5.
rear, or 10 in the rear, and side setbacks are 5.
But if your lot's 10,000, you can only build on X amount of square feet of that property. You can't cover it 100%. That's in there.
That's
somewhere.
Yeah, we have
Yes.
lot coverage requirements too.
Has to do with, a lot with, stormwater too. If you make it all impervious, then all that water's coming into the street and then we're having to deal with it, so
Right.
there's that. as I'm sitting here listening to this, we've got to, if we go with this, I've got to take a look at the utility connections, because we're not allowing one service to two homes on the same lot.
And,
So
and we,
that-
yep, we addressed that too.
Okay.
Is that for?
You know what might be
Mhm.
might be a good exercise for when we come back is maybe you guys could give us a couple neighborhoods that would be good to look at a couple lots, and let's just run some typicals. Maybe that would.
hard.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, like-
Trinidad, typical.
Whole lot.
Well, look in Colorado, you're looking at bigger lots, bigger houses, you're probably more likely to have something in that part of town, Colorado, Kansas, somewhere there where it's bigger. That would probably,
Yeah.
I mean,
On Colorado, I can think of some houses that already have the.
true.
Mhm.
But I'm saying,
yeah,
you go
there
up
are.
here on first, second, third up here, these lots, there's no way you're gonna
Yeah.
accommodate, you're gonna have to look at that part of town, Colorado, Kansas, somewhere over in that area if you're looking at something to run numbers by.
Another extreme
Mhm.
is, take for instance where I live. I have 2.5 acres.
Okay.
And let's say somebody comes up and they wanna, has a 2-acre lot,
Mm-hmm.
and they wanna build a 50,000 square foot home. How do we control that? Because then you have it affects the rest of the property owners. So I mean, there could be some extremes, would be determined because of the lot size, because we do have other areas and subdivisions in Trinidad that have big lot sizes.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the other thing we need to guard against too. Because we don't want to affect the current property owners where all of a sudden their taxes just go through the roof because of a particular individual.
So maybe 850 is too small again?
Not necessarily, I just think we just gotta watch for the extreme.
Yeah. Okay.
But at that point, you're not talking about an ADU though, you're talking about a primary residence, right?
Be a combination of both. Cause if you have, let's say you have a 10,000 square foot home, and you wanna add on a 2,000 square foot ADU.
Right, and is that and if that's okay with you, then that's okay with you. I mean, if you want to say, okay, in these lot sizes, if you have this lot size, you could have this size ADU. Or
No,
if you have
that's
I
why I
mean,
say like
it
that.
makes it a little tougher with implementation.
That's why I say keeping that ADU size to a certain size, I think is maybe not be a bad idea.
Okay.
And Moses has a thumb drive now.
Yeah.
These are the rules, Timmy.
Right. Okay. Cool. We'll work on
Digital
those.
Ten
What
Commandments.
about ownership and occupancy? We set forth regs that you needed to be needs to be operated by the ownership, same ownership, and you can't condominiumize them and sell them off separately.
That's a
Exactly,
mouthful, by the way.
yes.
I know. I hate saying it too. I just like saying condo process, but then I have to say the whole thing. Okay. All right. Oh gosh.
Here we go. Stack them, you got it.
Yeah. So we had heard that this was something that needed to be addressed, and so right now with shipping containers, they're really only allowed on a temporary basis. We have some if people wanted them permanently, the way our code is right now, I think it could happen. It'd be a little challenging because we have the roof pitch. If people wanted to build a house out of a shipping container, there's certain residential design standards, which, by the way, are not all that stringent or out of line from other communities. So.
And actually what's happening, there is a company in Pueblo that's building homes out of shipping containers.
And it could be, and some of those are really cool, like in a lot of the bigger towns along the Front Range, people are putting businesses in them, they're renovating, so we really need to know if you guys are supporting that,
But
or
they don't look like shipping containers
That's it.
when they're done.
Right.
That's the important part.
Right.
But they can't stick that on there and throw a 612 pitch from that side to side
Right.
and put a door and a couple of windows. That ain't gonna fly.
RV windows preferably.
There you go.
Exactly.
We have, you may know this, but a new ordinance for
That's what I was gonna
residential.
ask.
For residential areas, no shipping containers over 6 months, and they have to be connected to a building permit.
we
Is
took
that-
that ordinance
Okay,
and
I'm
we
sorry.
just put
I'm
it
sorry.
in this code.
Got it.
But
Okay.
I have heard that we've still had some challenges.
We've
Uh-huh.
got,
So that's,
yeah, we've got
We still
a,
have some challenges.
one,
I think he's.
property owner that wants to submit his foundation, put this on a permanent foundation, actually total of 6 for one level and 2 for a second level,
Mhm.
and build a home. And we also have somebody else who wants to put it on a trailer with wheels, so now it's not regulated by us, it's by the DMV.
Wow.
So I don't know.
But if it's regulated by the DMV, then it's covered as a recreational
RV.
vehicle at that point.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
So you have to have a permit if you occupy
That's
more
why
than
we
like
have
8
codes
days.
addressing RVs in residential areas anyway. So
Well, we have the tiny home regs, you know, but it sounds to me, so when we first initially were kicking this around, it was more to do with them being used on a temporary basis,
Right,
right?
dropping
And
them
so
for
now
storage. Yeah.
we have a little different condition, and so what we need to hear from council is, would you like us to help address shipping containers on a permanent?
right, because we're gonna have to have a design standard approved by the city.
Right.
They're gonna
Yeah,
have
and
to come
be-
in. I'm
yeah,
gonna
if
put
it's
6 of
permanent-
these, and this is what
Right.
it's gonna look like. We approve it. That's what it's gonna have to look like. That's what we're gonna have to have.
Okay.
Would shipping containers pass building code?
If they're done properly.
If they're,
Yeah.
yeah. In some communities, like, actually I have a client in Denver, the city of Denver is making them,
Right.
they bought these shipping containers to dry wood in, cause they build, furniture, like really fabulous high-end furniture. But they brought in these shipping containers, and the city of Denver's making them put them on a permanent foundation. And spending a lot of money, like you would think, oh, these are cheap. They're not. It's a lot of investment. I mean, they're done right, they can be really cool.
Do you see a lot of other communities looking at this situation?
Not so much, but you guys are interesting and creative.
I don't know if I like that.
When I was first asked to work on these regs, I was like, sure. On it, I thought it was more, we just have people that are, wanting to put them in their driveway and for too long a time.
Do you know about Drop City?
Drop City?
Well,
No.
we've been progressive since the 60s.
Oh, okay. So I don't ever want to limit your creativity
Okay,
in any
Google
of
that
that.
one
so.
for yourself.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
another-
So, but I'm happy to go back to the drawing board, and maybe these regs are. I guess I need to know from a temporary standpoint, are these working? And then it's more we need to address some design standards for permanent.
Permanent, exactly.
I think with what you have there, I think for now, I think will work, but we need to work on a final draft of some sort to
Some of
come up
them,
with
there's
something,
some lots that were grandfathered.
something that will
With
be
mobile homes
permanent.
aren't
Okay.
Because there's a lot of other questions
Modulars,
like the one that
though,
Mike was
are,
just talking,
mobile
guys
homes are
digging
pretty
a
much
hole
out
and
with a modular, which
going in,
is
partially
regulated.
underground or
Right,
whatever.
because you'll back it's on wheels,
On
so you'll
wheels.
back it in,
Similar to a mobile.
So,
spending more money.
What they're
Okay.
doing is coming in and just building over the top to get the roof.
Okay.
Because they're
We
so well
will
insulated.
work on that.
I mean, I know that's
So
unlikely,
next step, so we're gonna
See what?
incorporate all the input that we've heard tonight
Wow.
into the draft regulations. We're gonna do a little bit more code testing. Looks like we have a little bit more to do with ADUs and do a little bit more of that code testing and some design standards for shipping containers and whatnot. And then we do, our final definitions, always at the end of the code. We just like Aaron so brilliantly pointed out, hey, we need a definition, you know. We get that's really the last thing that we do, and then we format and we do a lot of cross-referencing and make sure everything works and ties together, and then we move forward to adoption here.
I have one item here that, a couple items I'll bring up real quick.
Sure.
This is on page 102, which is unenclosed outdoor storage prohibited. And, where do carports fit in with this? Is that considered an enclosed outdoor storage?
Yeah, and I
Page
think
100, I got a page 102. So I was just kind of wondering how carports, because they're not enclosed, but yet they're used all over. They buy these metal buildings or whatever, and they're not closed in. They're just 6 uprights and a roof, and that's it.
yeah, this really deals with unenclosed outdoor storage. So any of the storage associated with any accessory use or structure shall be within an entirely enclosed structure. I think what you're maybe talking about, like with a carport, that's mainly for cars.
Yeah. Or just other equipment. They might have a backhoe, or they might have a skid steer, they might have ATVs that they park in there. That's what I was wondering, how those are.
In the residential context,
Yes.
I think this is more dealing with more of a commercial context, but I could provide some clarity in the residential context.
It'd be good to know.
Okay.